It was my sister's wedding. Invitations went out to the entire neighborhood. Relatives across 3 cities got personal phone calls. Family photos were taken for the wedding album, everyone standing shoulder to shoulder, smiling for the camera. And on that gold-embossed card under the line that read "With love from," there were 5 names. My mother's name, my father's name, my 2 brothers' names, my sister's name. Mine wasn't there. Not misspelled, not shortened, not tucked into a corner in smaller font, just gone, as if I had never been born into that family. As if 28 years of my life had simply been deleted with one decision at a printing shop. If you're thinking, no family would ever do that to their own child, I need you to stay with me until the very end of the story. Because what I did after I saw that card didn't just change my life. It shook my entire family down to its foundation, and it's still shaking 2 years later. Let me take you back, because you need to understand the years that led up to that card, not just the card itself. I was the eldest of 3 children. On paper, everything about my childhood looked completely normal. There were new clothes every Eid. There was a cake on every birthday. School fees were paid on time, every single year, no complaints, no delays. If you looked at photographs from our family album, you would see a picture-perfect household. A mother, a father, 3 smiling children, and a comfortable, modest home that always smelled like something good was cooking. But there was one thing that lived quietly underneath all of that, something I felt long before I ever had the words to describe it. And that thing was difference. Whenever a decision needed to be made in our house, where we would go for vacation, what would be cooked for a big dinner, which school my younger siblings should attend, my opinion was always the last one asked for, if it was asked for at all. Whenever something good happened, whenever someone in the family accomplished something worth celebrating, the first round of congratulations, the first hug, the first proud phone call to the relatives, almost always went to my younger sister. Even when I was the one who had actually done the work. For years, I didn't take this seriously. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself that as the eldest, I was simply expected to be more independent, more self-sufficient, and that maybe that's just what it meant to be the firstborn in a house like ours. I made excuses for it because it was easier than facing what it actually meant. But there is one memory from my childhood that has never left me, not for a single year since it happened. I was 10 years old. My school held an essay writing competition, open to every grade, every classroom. Out of hundreds of students, I won first place. I was called up on stage in front of the entire school, given a trophy, and my class teacher told me she was going to personally recommend me for a scholarship program the following year. I remember running home that afternoon, my school bag bouncing against my back, my chest practically bursting with excitement. I couldn't wait to show my mother the trophy. I burst through the front door, breathless, and held it up with both hands. "Mom," I said, "look, I won first place out of the whole school." She glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds. Then she said, in the exact same tone she would have used to comment on the weather, "Okay, good, go wash your hands, dinner's ready." That was it. No hug. No "I'm proud of you." No phone call to my grandparents to brag, the way I had seen her do when my younger sister once got a decent grade on a spelling test. Just "go wash your hands." I stood there in the doorway for a moment, trophy still in my hands, and something inside me quietly closed. I didn't cry. I didn't say anything. I just understood in some small 10-year-old corner of my brain that celebrating me was not really a priority in that house. And I carried that understanding with me for the next 18 years, mostly in silence. As I grew older, I tried harder. I studied hard, I helped around the house without being asked twice. I took on responsibilities that weren't really mine to take on, hoping that somewhere along the way, someone would finally look at me the way they looked at my siblings. But the harder I tried, the more invisible I seemed to become. It was like pouring water into a cup with no bottom. It never filled up, no matter how much I gave. Now fast forward to 3 years ago. My younger sister, I'll call her Sarah for this story, got engaged to a man from a respected, fairly well-off family. The moment the engagement was announced, the entire house lit up. Relatives called non-stop. My mother cried happy tears on the phone with her sisters. My father, usually a quiet and reserved man, was practically glowing with pride. And I was happy too. I want to be very clear about that. Whatever resentment had built up quietly inside me over the years, I never once wished anything bad for Sarah. She was my sister, and despite everything, I loved her. I threw myself into the engagement preparations. I picked out decorations. I coordinated with the caterers. I stayed up late making sure the guest list was organized and every relative had been personally called. On the day of the engagement itself, I was the one running around making sure everything went smoothly while everyone else posed for photos. But once the actual wedding planning began, the real, big, months-long process, something started to shift, and I felt it almost immediately. I started getting left out of planning meetings. Not dramatically, not with any announcement, just quietly. I'd find out days later that a decision had already been made about the venue, or the caterer, or the guest count, in a conversation I was never invited to. When it came time to design the wedding invitation card, no one asked me a single question, not what my name should look like on it, not whether I wanted any particular title next to it, nothing. It was as if I had already been mentally filed under not essential. At first, I made every excuse in the book for this. Everyone's stressed, I told myself. Weddings are chaotic. My parents are older now, they're overwhelmed, they're not thinking clearly. I didn't want to be the person who made a big wedding about her own hurt feelings, so I stayed quiet and kept helping. Then the printed cards arrived. I remember the exact evening. I had just come home from work, tired, my feet aching from a long day at the office. I dropped my bag by the door and my mother called out from the living room. "Come here, take a look at the card, tell me how it turned out." I walked in, honestly expecting nothing more than to admire the gold foil and the calligraphy. I picked up the card. It was beautiful, I'll give them that. Heavy cardstock, elegant script, a soft floral border. My eyes moved down toward the family section, the part that read with love from, where every close family member's name is traditionally listed. I read it once. Then I read it again, certain I had somehow skipped over my own name by accident. I turned the card over, checked the back, checked the inside fold, thinking maybe there had been some printing error, some line that got cut off in production. There hadn't been. My name simply wasn't there. The strangest part is that there was room. There was plenty of space where and family could have easily been added, the way it often is when there are too many names to list individually. But no, every single other name was written out individually, in full. Mine was the only one missing, deliberately, cleanly, as if a decision had been made and executed with precision. I looked up at my mother. Her eyes met mine for exactly 1 second, and then she looked away, suddenly very interested in folding a nearby tablecloth. "Mom," I said, my voice already shaking, "where's my name?" She answered so casually, so lightly, that for a moment I almost thought I had misheard her. "Beta, you have a job, you're always busy, so we figured it wasn't necessary. Besides, you know you're still part of the family. What difference does it make if your name isn't on a card? What difference does it make?" I want you to sit with that sentence for a moment because I had to. 6 words said so easily, so casually, that they landed like a slap I never saw coming. 28 years of trying, of helping, of showing up, reduced to a shrug and a half-finished sentence about a tablecloth. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, the same question circling over and over in my head. Why? What had I actually done to deserve being erased like this, as if I had never existed in this family at all? The next morning I went to my younger brother, the softest-hearted of the 3 of us, the one who had never fully learned how to keep family secrets from me. I asked him directly, and after a lot of hesitation, he finally told me the truth. It turned out that Sarah's future-in-laws, before finalizing the marriage, had quietly requested a full picture of our family background, who lived in the house, what everyone did for a living, what kind of reputation the family carried in the community. And 2 years before all of this, I had been in a relationship, one my parents had disapproved of at the time, one that had already ended long before the engagement was ever announced, but one that had, unfortunately, become a small piece of neighborhood gossip back then. My parents were terrified that if my name appeared anywhere near this wedding, on the card, in the introductions, anywhere prominent, some relative or someone from the groom's side might bring up old stories, and that it could somehow tarnish Sarah's wedding, damage the family's image in front of new in-laws they were desperate to impress. So the simplest solution in their minds was to erase me. Quietly, cleanly, no confrontation, no explanation. Just leave my name off a piece of paper and hope no one asked too many questions. 28 years of effort, of loyalty, of trying to be good enough. All of it pushed aside in an instant because I didn't fit neatly into the perfect family image they wanted to present to strangers. I want to be honest with you. In that moment, I wasn't just heartbroken. I was furious. Because that mistake, that relationship from years ago, had already cost me once. I had already cried over it in private. I had already rebuilt my confidence brick by brick after it ended. And now, years later, with no warning, it was being used again, not to hurt me to my face, but to erase me silently in a way that was almost worse, because it didn't even give me the dignity of a real conversation. That night, lying awake, I made a decision that would change the entire direction of my life. I didn't scream. I didn't smash anything. I didn't storm into my parents' room and demand an explanation, even though every part of me wanted to. Instead, I sat with a strange, quiet stillness, and I thought to myself, if these people cannot even give me a place on a piece of paper, then I am going to stop giving them a place in my life that they haven't earned. But I am going to do this without destroying myself in the process. I made 3 promises to myself that night, and I want to share them with you because I think they matter more than the drama of the story itself. First, I promised that I would still fully participate in the wedding, not for my parents, not even really for myself, but for Sarah, who I still loved and who hadn't necessarily made this decision herself. Second, I promised that after that wedding, I would begin building a life that belonged entirely to me, financially independent, emotionally independent, standing on my own 2 feet in every possible way. Third, and most importantly, I promised myself that I would never again allow anyone, family or otherwise, the power to make me feel invisible. I didn't quit my job in some dramatic act of defiance. If anything, I worked harder than I ever had. I picked up extra projects. I started saying yes to opportunities I had previously been too afraid to take. I finally launched a small side business I had been quietly dreaming about for over a year but never had the courage to start, something that was completely, entirely mine, with no one else's name attached to it. And quietly, without telling anyone, I began looking at small apartments I could eventually afford on my own. The wedding day arrived. I got dressed, did my makeup, and went, exactly as I had promised myself I would. I smiled at every guest. I helped coordinate the entrance. I watched Sarah get ready in her bridal outfit, watched her eyes fill with happy tears as the henna artist finished the final touches on her hands, and in that moment I genuinely felt happy for her. Whatever had happened with that card, I couldn't bring myself to resent her for it. To this day, I don't fully know how much she knew or didn't know about the decision. I've chosen not to dig into that particular wound. But there is one moment from that wedding day that I will never, ever forget. During the reception, one of the groom's older relatives, a great-aunt I believe, who had clearly looked closely at the invitation card at some point, turned to my mother in front of a small circle of guests and asked, quite loudly, "So how many daughters does your family actually have?" The card only listed one daughter's name. The air around us went still for a moment. My mother's face drained of color. My father, standing a few feet away, suddenly became very interested in adjusting his sleeve, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. And then, before either of them could stumble through some excuse, I stepped forward, smiled, and answered the question myself, as calmly as I could manage. There are two daughters. I'm the eldest. My name must have gotten left off, probably a printing mix-up. I want to explain why I said that, because I've thought about it a lot since. I could have told the truth right there in front of everyone and watched my parents' carefully built image crumble in real time. Part of me wanted to, but I chose not to protect them exactly, but because I realized in that instant that humiliating them publicly wasn't really who I wanted to be. My answer to all of this was never going to come from a scene at a wedding. It was going to come from what I did with the rest of my life. A few weeks after the wedding, I moved out. Quietly. No dramatic fight, no slammed doors, no screaming match in the living room. I packed my things over a weekend while my parents were visiting relatives, and I left a short note on the kitchen table. Thank you for everything you've given me over the years. I need to build my own path now. I'm here whenever you need me. My mother called me that same evening, crying, asking what on earth I thought I was doing, moving out alone, unmarried into my own apartment. I simply told her, Mom, the card where my name was missing, that's exactly where a new chapter of my life begins. I won't pretend the next 2 years were easy, because they weren't. Living alone for the first time in my life was genuinely hard. I had to learn how to budget every rupee, how to fix a leaking faucet with a video tutorial at 11 at night, how to sit with silence on evenings when loneliness crept in, and there was no one down the hall to talk to. There were nights I cried into my pillow, wondering if I had made a terrible mistake. But alongside every single one of those hard nights, there was also something I had never felt before in my entire life, a strange, quiet peace. The peace of finally being free from constantly performing for approval that was never going to come. My small side business, slowly, month by month, started to grow. It began as something I ran out of my apartment in the evenings after work. Within a year, it had grown enough that I was able to leave my full-time job and focus on it completely. By the second year, I had rented a small office space, hired my first employee, and started being recognized in my professional circles for my own name, my own work, not as anyone's daughter, not as anyone's sister, but as myself. And maybe the most beautiful part of this whole story is that I found my real family during that time. Not blood relatives, but friends who showed up for me, who celebrated my wins the way I had always wished my own mother would, who sat with me through the hard nights without judgment. And most importantly, I found myself. I became, for the first time in my life, my own biggest supporter. Now here's the part of this story that I think will affect you the most, so stay with me. About a year ago, my sister Sarah's marriage started falling apart. The promises her in-laws had made before the wedding, promises about respect, about independence, about how she would be treated in her new home, slowly stopped being honored. Over time, she began being treated as something like a second-class member of her own household, expected to prove her worth constantly, made to feel small in ways that, honestly, sounded painfully familiar to me. One night she called me, crying so hard I could barely understand her at first. When she finally calmed down enough to speak clearly, she said something I will never forget. "Sis, I'm so sorry. I knew your name wasn't on the card. I saw it before it was printed and I didn't say anything. I was scared to speak up. I understand now more than ever how that must have felt for you." I sat there on the phone, quiet for a moment, feeling something in me soften completely. Because at the end of the day, she was still my sister, and in her own way, she had become a victim of the very same family system that had once erased me, just wearing a different face this time. I told her without a second of hesitation, "It's okay. I'm here for you, whatever you need, whenever you need it." And I meant it. Over the following months, when things got hardest for her, I was the one who showed up. I was the one who drove 3 hours in the middle of the night when she needed to get out of that house for a weekend. I was the one who sat with her at 2 in the morning while she cried, long before our parents even fully understood what was happening in her marriage. Watching me rebuild my life so completely, my own business, my own home, my own name standing on its own, something in my parents slowly began to shift. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't one big dramatic apology scene. It happened gradually over months in small moments. Then one evening my father called me. I could hear it in his voice before he even said anything, that particular kind of shame that sits heavy in someone's throat. "Beta," he said, "we did you wrong. We really did. Please forgive us." I didn't yell at him. I didn't bring up every painful memory from my childhood, even though I could have listed them one by one without pausing for breath. I didn't take the kind of loud, dramatic revenge that people often expect from stories like this. I simply told him, "I'm not angry with you, Dad, but I can't go back to being invisible in that house again. I'll still stay connected to all of you. I'll still visit. I'll still show up when it matters. But from now on, it will be on my own terms." And that's exactly how things are today. I visit my parents. I call my mother every Sunday. I show up for family events when I choose to, not because I'm expected to disappear into the background once I arrive. My relationship with my family isn't perfect, and I don't think it ever fully will be. But it's honest now, in a way it never was before. And for the first time in my life, I feel like I actually have a seat at the table, even if it took me building my own table to finally get one. Here's what I want you to take away from this, more than any single detail of the story itself. This was never really just about a wedding card. It's about the quiet pain that so many people carry silently, when their own family makes them feel like they're less than, when love only comes with conditions attached, when your worth in someone else's eyes only counts as long as you fit neatly into the image they want to present to the world. If something like this has ever happened to you, whether it was a card, an event you were left off of, or just one small careless sentence that lodged itself permanently in your heart, I want you to remember this one thing. Your worth was never, ever determined by someone else's guest list. Sometimes the greatest gift life ever gives you isn't something handed to you. It's something taken away from you, because that loss is exactly what forces you to go looking for your own strength, the strength that was probably in you all along, just waiting for a reason to show itself. Today, I genuinely want to thank the woman whose name got quietly erased from that wedding card, because that was the exact day a stronger, freer, and far more honest version of her life finally began. If this story moved you or reminded you of something in your own life, I'd love to hear about it. And if you want more real, heartfelt stories like this one to find their way to you, stick around, because the next story might just be closer to your own than you think.